cardiovascular side of the equation to this, because that's something that like is studied quite often with respect to maybe like endurance athletes and other folks. But what can you tell us about the cardiovascular implications of PED use and maybe misuse for people who are taking those supplements, both short term and long term? And it's interesting because I think that, you know, to the outside eye, like a lot of folks, maybe like around my age who I went to school with, they'll say like, oh, like, you know, we hear about bodybuilders, whether like a legit competitor or someone on YouTube dying of something along the lines of a heart attack, a stroke, or a pulmonary embolism. And that's just like some sort of blockage, some sort of increase in hypercholesterolemia, or, you know, some issue with that. But you keep bringing up this idea of blood pressure and even atherosclerosis. Are these brought upon by single exogenous sources or a compound of sources? Like you can take testosterone, you can take GH, or do most people do a compound of things in order to stimulate more growth than they were able to get off of one specific? supplement. And in that population who's doing that, does it not really matter if it's like someone in like their 20s or 30s, or even, I mean, if someone, if I guess if you're in like your 50s and 60s, you're beginning to really battle sarcopenia at that time point, you're battling like maybe a bit of hypogonadism, you're battling osteoporosis. So maybe at 50, 60, it's a different conversation. But are you talking mainly within people who are like 20 and 30 and who should have a pretty decent level of testosterone just baseline? And I guess for someone who's like not really like I studied the endocrine system pretty heavily in grad school, but mainly from like the medical clinical perspective out of like a medical physiology textbook. And I'm not really in line so much with like the PED, the sports science way of doing things. But like I've had like a lot of students and even clients ask me who are in like their late teens, early 20s, maybe early 30s about PEDs. And I understand the endocrine system, but not really the PED usage. If you are someone who is trying to maybe not even compete in bodybuilding, but just get stronger, more muscular, increase their body composition, is it, and this is air quotes, safer by any means or more natural by any means to get on TRT or GH because we endogenously produce testosterone and GH? Or is it really that much of a competitive advantage to use some other compound which is synthesized in a lab somewhere? I don't personally know. I understand how the hormones work, but I don't know what people do and what like air quotes safe versus very unsafe is. Yeah, I've seen them on YouTube. Yeah, they're ridiculous. Yeah. No, and I love that. It's funny because you brought up that idea of like students who might be, you know, and I look at everything personally. Like everyone has their bias, right? And my bias is cardioprotective. What can I do to protect my heart? I want to be on this earth as long as I can with the people I love the most. So cardioprotective wise, I guess before I get to my point, I want to ask you if someone is like really driven about bodybuilding and they are taking X, Y, and Z, are there cardioprotective ways of doing that? Obviously, alcohol is bad, smoking's bad. We don't have to be the ones to say that. But are things like omega-3 fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory, are vitamins and minerals, which are antioxidative, are complete proteins, are low glycemic index carbohydrates, doing ample amounts of cardiovascular exercise, getting sufficient sleep and rest and recovery, are those things cardioprotective enough for someone who might be, air quotes, responsibly taking something? Could that be enough for like a cycle, so to speak, before they kind of wean off? Or is there not a lot of research to detail that? No, I'm happy you said that, and it's interesting because I always ask my students when I teach them about like sports supplements, and by sports supplements I mean whey, casein, creatine, HMB, beta alanine, like like all like the fun over the counter bodybuilding.com supplements, and I'm like, what do you guys know about creatine? What do you know about whey? And there's always like several students who are just like, oh, isn't that like a drug? My mom found me taking like my personal story is I snuck in whey protein when I was 15 and my mom took it away from me because she thought I was on drugs. And I was like, no, like whey is one of the two proteins in cow's milk. It's okay. And it's funny because I had a doctor down here who I started seeing like a year or two ago. I was like, hey, I'm, just turned 30. I just want to get my blood checked, whatever. And he was really questioning me. He's like, you're a pretty big guy. He's like, I don't really need to get your blood checked. I think you're doing okay. And I was like, I'm not asking you for anything illicit. I just would like to get my blood checked because high cholesterol runs in my family. So for me, like it would sound very, very hopeful to think that a primary care physician would very much care about your health now and your health for the future. And if you're open to that and saying, hey, like I'm doing this because this is a passion of mine, can you help me along this way to maintain my health and guide me along that way? Because my doctor told me to stop taking creatine. He's like, no one needs that. And I was like, all right, let's start quoting the research on here on maybe decreasing neurodegeneration down the road. Yeah, that's something I probably have to do. So with you specifically, because you play the role of a bodybuilder, an athlete, coach, researcher, professor, how how do all of those roles like inform one another? How do they help one another? I'm interested to know because I love the idea of someone walking the walk and talking the talk. How do you teach your students and your clients about like the safe and effective science-backed ways of doing things based on even your own experience of what works and what doesn't work? Have you found, because you brought up the cardio side of that, have you found people either anecdotally or within your own research that you've done who are more or less resistant to anatomical and physiological changes within the cardiovascular system with respect to PED use? What's interesting with that, I love that you brought up that point at the end, because I think more recently I've been interested in the FFMI, the fat free mass index. And a lot of the proponents of it will talk about people like, the anomalies who you've heard about, like maybe like Ronnie Coleman or Kai Green, like these mass monsters. And it's like, if you're a mass monster, like you have this huge amount of skeletal muscle hypertrophy, it's not by accident. There's probably like some sort of genetic component that maybe like you can just grow muscle a lot more quickly. So therefore, you were just drawn to lifting weights. You were drawn to the sport of bodybuilding. You want to get better. Same thing too. If you're 7 feet tall and you find yourself in the NBA, it's like, oh, that probably wasn't a mistake. Like you're 7 feet tall, you got drawn into sports, and you're dunking the ball. And I always think about that too with respect to like maybe a lot of those guys like. were hyper responders to lifting weights. And then they were hyper responders to just protein consumption and, PED use. And like, who knows, maybe they'll live long, happy, healthy lives. And they just hit the genetic lottery with respect to like body composition, and other people, not as much. Mhm. I'm just going to close my blind. Yeah. Yeah, we had started out this conversation talking about like some of our initial thoughts and training styles and belief systems. And I've never like done a bodybuilding competition. Maybe I will in the future or something, but I love the process of consuming healthy meals every like 3 to 6 hours. I love looking at my macronutrients, my micronutrients. I love progressive overload. What what drew you into that, and what drew you into like actually competing and saying, hey, like I can continually get better? Because I've seen like on your Instagram, you're always posting progress photos, and you're like, yeah, I've been in the game for 20 years. And I love to see that like dedication to the sport of like you're still looking to get better. Do you think that most people would benefit from having that sort of process in their life? And it doesn't have to be competing in bodybuilding. Like I run my marathons and my ultras, and there's a process to getting in shape, to running 100-mile weeks. And I honestly, like, this got me through, like, no one really knows like what that got me through as a teenager and as a young adult, and my mom being sick. Like, this was it. It was the running community got me through everything. And I feel like with you with bodybuilding, and I've heard this from so many other people too, it's like, no, like, this pulled me out of so many holes, and it got me to not drink or not smoke or not get into trouble. And it's like that process of like just wanting for yourself to get better is just like it's better than any other therapy session that you could ever have, of just like, no, 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 I need this for me. It's that high agency of like, I can take on my life, and like this is like the mode through which I'm going to do that. No, yeah, I love that too. It's almost like that quote, like, how you do anything is how you do everything. And I really, like, I almost write myself a note in my phone every single day, and I just type that out 2 or 3 times just to, like, remind myself. I'm like, "Hey, like, you ran this morning, you hit your biking workout this morning. I'm gonna go teach a couple classes. I'm gonna do a couple podcasts. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm gonna make, well, dinner with my girlfriend. I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. Let's do this the best that I can, so when I get to bed, I feel amazing." And you just compound that, and it's like, wow, like, I feel really proud of this, and now I can take on anything. What I'm curious, with you being a researcher and you doing so much cool work with like the cardiovascular system and PEDs and body composition and being on this sports side of things. If I could give you an unlimited amount of test subjects, and the IRB wasn't a thing, and you have as many co-researchers and funding as you wanted, what are some pressing questions that you've always had with respect to maybe bodybuilding, physique, muscle hypertrophy, nutrition, that you would like to know if you had an unlimited amount of time compressed into like a couple of months? Yeah, there's so many unanswered questions that like we wish we could do. But I think that we can probably fill in some of these gaps over time because things are changing. Like I don't know if you saw like that Jeff Nippard video where he has like his own lab now. And it completely challenges the way that we do scientific research with an IRB through an institution with funding. And like one thing that like he talked about was like, what if you train your biceps twice a week, but you have like a matched amount and you just train it every single day? Or if you have someone who's enhanced versus natural, can you help them grow their calves or whatever it might be? And it's like these sorts of things always have my mind going too. And I think even the idea of like, bone loading or axial loading exercises, like if someone like only squatted versus only leg pressed, and you could build up more bone mineral density through, through the spine versus like if you're like in a seated position, how much does bone mineral density equate to muscular hypertrophy, muscular strength, and even adding in a complete protein versus protein complementarity, it's like endless what you could do with it. Um, and I wish I had the power to do that. What is in the pipeline for you over like the next few months? We were talking about your like the publication that just came out and everything. What else do you have coming in the pipeline? Oh, that's gonna be a few of those. I feel like it's gonna be, like, pretty earth-shattering to, like, the bodybuilding physique community. With the standardization process of, body composition, did you compare, I don't know, like DEXA, BIA, bod pod, and at different time points, as you said, you could do like the fasted in the morning versus like eating and drinking throughout the day. Then we'll measure you again, or was it like one mode of measuring them? Hmm. Are you partial to any one specific model? I mean, like we all came from exercise science labs in like grad school and maybe undergrad doing, the skin fold calipers, maybe underwater hydrostatic weighing, maybe bod pod. And then in grad school, I used primarily an ultrasound. But is the DEXA still the gold standard and what you would prefer if everyone could get access to a $200,000 DEXA? I could be mistaken, but is the research with the BIA, like potentially like an in body, is that more precise and less accurate? Or is it accurate and precise enough to like publish and you can trust that data? Yeah. Now, I always tell my students that when we talk about body composition in class, I'm like, if you have one of those scales at your house that may be like 20 or $30 and it connects to your, your smartphone, like there's no real reason why you need to know like your bone density and like your body composition. But if you're like as curious and obsessed as like an exercise science student, then like, yeah, just track the changes over time, optimize your training, your nutrition, your diet, and like that, the scale will move maybe a little bit, maybe a lot, but just, and it's fun to look because I've had the same scale now for 5 years and I've seen like the trend over the course of the 5 years. I'm like, oh, it's cool. Like I've put on a little bit of muscle. Absolutely. All right. Well, I'll, where can people find you and, your upcoming book and book chapters and all the theses and everything? I want to link it down in the description. Awesome. I love like the branding. That's like the easiest thing. Awesome. Well, thank you for coming on. This was an awesome conversation. And when you publish the rest of those, papers, I'll definitely be asking you to come back on. I can't wait to see the findings and the best practices in the ISSN paper for bodybuilding. I think that's going to be brilliant. Alrighty.